How's it going, you magnificent people? I'm Jake the Ashen Hollow, and welcome to the Rekindled series. In this first video, we'll be going back over the tale that is the tragedy of Gundyr. So sit back and enjoy a much more quality version of Lothric's ruse, wherein I pronounce the name Gundyr correctly. In our travels as the Unkindled Ash, we meet Gundyr twice, once at the beginning of our journey and later on in the past, which is only a sentence that makes sense in reference to Dark Souls. After the bells toll and the Unkindled Ash rise from their graves, they are awaited by the former champion, now judge. Iudex Gundyr bars the path to Firelink Shrine, the coiled sword binding him to measure the worth of the would-be chosen Ash. The coiled sword reads, "This sword is only bequeathed to chosen Ash as judged by the Iudex, who awaits the arrival of Ash as a scabbard." This makes sense in the grand scheme of things, obviously. Much like the Asylum Demon in Dark Souls 1, the adherents of the Age of Fire needed a way to test the strength of their would-be saviors. But who was Gundyr before he became the scabbard awaiting the judgment of Ash? Well, we get a few clues if we push past the illusory wall just beyond the room we find former and consumed King Osiros. I'll warn you, however, the tale that I gazed upon is one of betrayal and tragedy. Here, sometime in the past, in the darkened shrine, we encounter Champion Gundyr. His soul reads, "Once a champion came late to the festivities and was greeted by a shrine without fire and a bell that would not toll." So we know that at least to start, Gundyr was meant to be the champion of the flame, the same degree of champion that he would one day preside over. But something wasn't right. The shrine was without fire and the bells were silent. We get a bit more of the puzzle if we read the Estus Ring, which is found within the tower of Firelink Shrine, where the bodies of the Firekeepers are placed for their eternal rest. The ring reads, "This ring was entrusted to a certain Firekeeper, but in the end she never met her champion, and the ensuing tragic farce became a favorite tale of the masses." This makes the most sense from what we know to be Champion Gundyr, who arrived late to the shrine to find nothing, including his Firekeeper. Now, the idea of this tale being a farce is important. A farce is typically defined as a comedic and dramatic work, often using crude characterizations and improbable situations in a theater-like setting. But it can also mean a sham, travesty, or a pretense. I believe this pretense was set in motion by the Lothric royal family. The Cinders of Prince Lothric read, "The Lothric Bloodline was obsessed with creating a worthy heir, and when this proved impossible, resorted to unspeakable means. Suffice it to say, the path to linking the fire is a cursed one indeed." Now, we don't need to get into everything horrible that the Lothric Bloodline did, but we know they were ruthless in their approach and would even sacrifice their own family in the name of their flame and light. This also includes Gundyr, who I believe was a part of the Lothric royal family, possibly even the oldest son, that we know of anyway. The description of Gundyr's helm reads, "Ancient helm of a set of cast iron armor belonging to Champion Gundyr. Modeled after a former king. Gundyr, or the belated champion, was bested by an unknown warrior. He then became sheathed to a coiled sword in hopes that someday the first flame would be linked once more." Now, some of this has to be taken with little grain of salt. Some take the modeled after a former king part to be a direct reference to Old King Doran in Demon Souls. And I get that connection, 100%. FromSoft puts Easter eggs to their other works and games all the time, but they never tie the lore from separate franchises together like that. They're quite particular with their item descriptions. So I think modeled after a former king is a direct reference to a king that existed within Dark Souls itself. The only two figures labeled as former kings that we know of are the Nameless King and the consumed King Osiros. We can see visibly that the Nameless King's armor doesn't look like Gundyr's, but Osiros is a pale drake now, so we're up shit creek if we wanted to know what he looked like before. But using science and Sherlock-rivaled deduction, if I had to guess between the two, I'd probably say it's modeled after Osiros, especially if we're considering the idea that Gundyr was a part of his family, and sons modeling themselves after their fathers in Dark Souls is almost a theme. See again the Nameless King. Also, look at the details of the armors of the other members of the Lothric royal family that we know of. Golden pieces and trim adorning and hanging off the pieces of the armor, and the dark royal blue cloths being prominent in all sets, and of course the crowns worked into the helmet designs, which is exactly what we see going on with Gundyr's armor. It makes a lot of sense to me that Gundyr was a part of the Lothric bloodline, which makes it even more tragic what his family did. You know, unspeakable means and such. So the farce then was the fact that the royal family was setting Gundyr up the whole time. filling his head with delusions of grandeur, how he would be the champion to the flame and save the world, etc., etc. But did they know all along that they only wanted him as a pawn to judge the one who would truly be their champion? Gundyr's halberd reads, "Halberd of Gundyr the Champion, received when he was charged with his duty. This old cast-iron halberd has the power to break poise and is said to never crumble, seeming to suggest that Gundyr was fated to eternal service from the beginning." That description says a lot. Gundyr was always meant to play the role of judge from the start, but the farce was always that he truly believed himself a champion. Betrayed by the very family he meant to sacrifice himself for anyway. We know that in the untended graves he was bested by an unknown champion, likely the unkindled one when we made our way through the area. Perhaps that was also part of the plan. With Gundyr defeated and weakened, they made him a prisoner and slated him with what was his true duty all along. The prisoner's chain, made from Gundyr's soul, helps confirm this idea. It reads, "Portion of a steel chain used to restrain Gundyr. A prisoner is one who has staked everything on a belief, a proclivity most apparent in the greatest champions." His belief being the lies his family fed him from the start, knowing that he was truly a champion in his own rights, and they would prey upon that very proclivity. Restrained, betrayed, and defeated, only then did they reveal the coiled blade they would pierce him with, damning him to his true duty. Only when the truest of champions arose and bested the judgment of this heartbroken Iudex would Gundyr rest. There is a grave in Lothric that sees no visitors, a dark place where rootless warriors rest. The Queen of Lothric alone cared to wish the poor souls good fortune. Perhaps you could call it shame, call it guilt, to visit the would-be resting place of the son she betrayed for a flame that would always continue to diminish, always just be out of reach.
Flame. Where is the flame?
I've fate today.
My mother would not betray me. Father would not.
Things are already late. Sweet mother, dear other,
Not my fate.
I fail you. Don't do exactly what was intended when I was born. Sold my soul away when I was born. You ripped it all away from me. I feel darkness creeping in. I become the price of man.
Farewell, Ashen Judge. Varia Nox.
In this place, too precise over the human race. Life is so meaningless.
Very well, pygmy. You think yourself worthy to link the flame?
So I beckon thee, old unkindled friend, old unkindled friend, unfit to be cinder, and so